Listen, I quit so you don't have to, is what I often say to people. I'm not telling you to leave your job. What I'm telling you is we get to create success in a way that feels full and not empty. We have choices that we get to make every single day. We choose pause over push. Those beats is what we need to be creative, to be innovative, to show up as badasses, to show up powerfully for ourselves and our teams and our families and our communities and the people around us. So if you give yourself no other gift, write yourself a permission slip right now.
Hey friends, welcome to Right Off Track, your favorite entrepreneurial resource where we dive into the mindset, strategy, and purpose of entrepreneurs around the world who are sharing their real stories and insights with you. I believe that we all have a unique purpose in life, and that embracing our unique and special journey will help uncover that. If this helps you on your journey, I so welcome your support as we grow and improve this channel. Join us, subscribe. I promise you, I'm fully dedicated to making this work better every step of the way. So share your feedback, subscribe, share with a friend, and let's go on this adventure together right off track. Enjoy this episode.
Going off track is taking a chance on yourself.
Following your pulse of curiosity.
It's making your own decisions.
The most wonderful adventure.
Hey friends, it's your host Anya Smith here. I'm so excited for this interview. Imagine climbing to the top of the corporate world only to find it's not what you expected. That's exactly what happened to our guest. She was living the dream as a marketing boss of Harley-Davidson, but guess what? She ditched it all for something even cooler. Now she's all about helping folks find their true purpose and joy in life. She's been on TEDx, quoted in Forbes, and even compared to Brene Brown. And the best part, she's here to share her secret sauce with us. So get comfy and let's welcome the amazing Shelley Paxton to the show. Shelley, so excited to have you here.
Oh my God, Anya, it's so good to be here. Thank you for having me. You are a bright light in this world. So I'm looking forward to this.
So are you. And I'm so excited that we met. We had a brief prep call and you just like dazzled me with your energy and spirit. And I know Harley-Davidson is a name that a lot of people know, but could you give us a little bit of the backstory that maybe what led you there and out of there?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, I mean, listen, I had such an incredibly fortunate career in the advertising and marketing world. It's one that took me around the world. I worked on the advertising side and then in the digital media world for incredible brands like McDonald's and Visa and Intel and back in the day, AOL, and then Harley-Davidson came knocking. And I ended up going to Harley to help them really create an integrated global marketing organization because I had so much experience working with these other global brands, living and working around the world, creating global marketing organizations. And so I was like, oh my God, how do you say no? And it came at a really interesting point in my life because when Harley came calling, I had just gone through a really, really tumultuous divorce, probably is the best word for it. And so I was really looking, I was kind of on this healing and recovering journey, and I was looking to reinvent myself. And I'm like, well, what better way to get my mojo back and become a total badass again than go to Harley-Davidson? And so that ultimately it was the last 6.5 years of a 26-year pretty storied career in marketing. And yeah, I mean, listen, I feel so honored and privileged that I got to steward a brand that people love so much that they tattoo it on their freaking bodies. And I got to tell people like I rode motorcycles around the world for a living, which makes my story even more interesting because I ultimately left, and I know we'll get there.
Yes, that's amazing. Of course, you started at 5 when you were in marketing, so you've done it all along.
Oh,
and so,
right. Thank you.
And so, yes, I can hear the passion. I can hear the positive kind of growth opportunity that also was opportunity to change, in a difficult situation and kind of capture the career change with life was changing as well. So then what was the pivotal point? Because it seems like you had it all. On paper, everything looks fantastic. And here you are riding motorcycles for a living. What made you be like, oh, I need something different?
Yeah, and I wish it were that simple. And this is why, honestly, this is why I tell my story. And I know I was sharing this with you when we first connected too, because people are like, who leaves? Ultimately, I became chief marketing officer of Harley-Davidson. So I had a title I always wanted. I worked with a brand that, especially in the marketing space, I mean, it's so sexy and it's legendary and it's iconic in its own right. And so it's like, who on earth walks away from that job, which is exactly what I did. And it wasn't an overnight thing. And it certainly wasn't easy. So what ended up happening is, like I said, I spent 6.5 years there, but about 5.5 years in, from all perspectives, looking outside in, I had it all. Like you said, it was like I literally I ticked all the boxes of this traditional success script that I was handed, and it served me very, very well for decades. And then I find myself in this situation and everybody's like, oh my God, so sexy, so cool, so amazing. Like, I hope to be you one day. I want to be you when I grow up. And I was starting to wake up feeling like this emptiness inside and feeling this pure exhaustion and wondering, like, how can you tick all of these things that everyone tells you equals success and feel the way that I was feeling? And so I start getting glimpses of that, and then a nightmare starts hitting me. So literally the entire final year of my time at Harley, I was woken up in the middle of the night by the same nightmare on repeat. And what I came to realize is that, when we're going about our lives and like we hear that little voice inside and it's kind of whispering, and then maybe it starts to shout, yes, and then it like is squawking at you, and then it just hits you like a 2x4 in some way, shape, or form. Right. That's what happened to me. And in my case, I mean, oftentimes it's tragedy, it's illness, it's, our body breaks down, we mentally break down, maybe some combination or many combinations of those things. And in my case, it was this nightmare that was leaving me just on the floor because I was no longer sleeping. I was completely tortured by what I was seeing. And it was ultimately that little voice that I was ignoring during the day that was making sure I was listening at night. And it took me months and honestly some professional help for me to start to peel apart, like, what am I seeing? What is going on? And ultimately I figured out that I was being forced to see that my soul, I mean, we can talk about the nightmare, but I was looking directly at my soul, and my soul was dying. It was lying on a floor in the shape of my pug, my little dog, who had passed away before I even went to Harley. And I'm finding him in a closet, malnourished and longing for love and attention and, fuel, food, nourishment. And I'm realizing over time, and with the help of a therapist and a doctor, that ultimately I'm seeing that my soul is dying in a dark closet that I've never seen before. And I'm realizing that the reason I feel empty, the reason I'm not feeling joy from what I'm doing, is because I'm disconnected with myself, my truth, my essence. And that was the big wake up call. And the moment I realized that I could keep going on this way and I could make a lot of money and my bank account would be rich, but I would be very, very poor from the inside.
Shelley, thank you so much for sharing that vulnerability. I think it's hard to talk about this. And I think that people who are successful, especially, they go through a unique quiet suffering, where it's hard to say, hey, I'm not feeling good, when people are like, well, how dare you? How dare you complain about all the riches and glamour and sexy position that you have? And that can be very challenging also when you feel like everything that you are taught to do, you've accomplished, right? You
Yeah.
checked all the boxes. People tell you this is what's going to get you to where you want to be. And I've done that. So like what's happening? So that internal strife becomes even harder because societal pressures have been like, guiding you. You've done that. And then you can't really complain because there's a lot of lack of sympathy probably, or the feeling like there might
Oh
be
my
lack of
God.
sympathy, right?
I
And
love that you called that out
yeah.
because I 100%, the reason it took me so long to even ask for help
Mm.
and start to dig into this is because I was like, I felt guilty. I felt 100% guilty that I could even feel this way. I'm in
Yeah.
this privileged position. I have so much good fortune. I'm in a job I'd always dreamed of being in. So it's very hard to admit. And I always say, what are you pretending not to know? Because admitting to ourselves is always, that's the start of being honest. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's very
100%.
hard.
And I love that you're showcasing that because then it gives people the opportunity to like, hey, maybe I can relate to this story as well. Wherever I am on my professional journey, it's okay to go beyond that guilt and whatever and honor the true feeling behind it, no matter where I'm
Yes.
at in the journey. And that's why I think it's tragic. We see a lot of people who we think like they're the epitome of success, and then something tragic happens in life, self-induced, it's like some kind of meltdown breakthrough, whereas like they just haven't found how do you do something differently, something that might tragically happen. So I'm glad that you took the time to reflect. Can you share a little bit, whatever you want to go into, like what was that reflection process? Like where did that take you on after you said, hey, this is happening, this is real, I need to honor this?
I mean, to be honest, the beginning of the reflection process was I went and found help. So I want to hit on that point again because I say this in all of my talks, and if you anything you usually see from me, I'm like, please remember that asking for help is a sign of strength and not a sign of weakness, because I was raised in a family where it was like, we don't ask for help. We're always the life of the party and we show up strong and, we can do it. We've got this. And then we cry and crumple behind closed doors. And so I had to make a decision that I knew that wasn't going to serve me. Like that life training, that, modeling I got from my own family, from my parents. I was like, this isn't gonna serve me. It will probably kill me, actually. So the beginning for me was simply stepping into the strength to say, I need help and I'm going to go find help. And so between a doctor and a therapist, I was able to start understanding, like really, really digging into, what am I seeing in this nightmare? What does this mean? What is the stuff that I've been ignoring for a very long time? What are the narratives I've been telling myself about success and about the situation I'm in? Why do I feel guilty about all of this? And so that was the beginning, and that introduced me to really what I understand now are simple concepts, but I also get that they're really hard for a lot of us who are overachievers and who've had a degree of, I'll call it traditional success. And an example of one of those things was starting to slow down. And
Preach.
oh man. And I'm not going to sit here and say, I figured it all out. I'm on the other side and it's all rainbows. I still have to remind myself to practice this every single day. And some days I practice it and I show up a little better and a little more powerfully for myself than others. And it was a life-changing experience. And I'll never forget one of the guys that I was working with at the time, it was actually a doctor, and he said to me, take 10 minutes, and he introduced me to meditation. I didn't know meditation. I wasn't surrounded by people who were bringing mindfulness to leadership. That is not the way Harley was. That is not the way the ad agency world was. And I was like, what is this? What do you mean? Like, spend 10 minutes in the morning? I don't have 10 minutes in the morning. I'm going nonstop from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. I run a global organization. I mean, listen, we can all fill in the blanks. We've all had our version of this, right? And I will never forget, he just looked at me and he said, if you don't have 10 minutes, you probably need 3 hours.
Yes. Yes.
And I was like, ooh, wow, that hit. And I thought, okay, I can start 5 or 10 minutes, not going to kill me. And then, as I say this in my book, as I gave myself a little bit more time and a little bit more time, and I started getting quiet, slowing down, and I'm not talking about big blocks of time. I'm talking starting with 5, 10, 15 minutes. And honestly, that's where it starts. And it doesn't even have to progress further than that, because what blew me away is what started coming up for me as I did that more consistently. And that's when I started to understand that seeing Mocha, my pug, was a proxy for seeing my soul. And I started to understand that I was living my dad's success script. And yes, it had served me, like I said, and it wasn't serving me any longer. And it was time to listen, and it was time to understand first of all, understand myself and listen to what my soul had been trying to tell me for a long time, and understand what is my success script? What does that look like? What are my values? What are my deepest desires? And so step by step, and I want to reiterate this, I say all the time, every badass accomplishment is a series of tiny steps. So please, 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 as you're listening to this, as you're watching this, this isn't like I woke up and changed my whole life. And Anya, I know it was the same for you. You didn't wake up one day and change your whole life. We take baby steps. It's like take one tiny step in the direction of your truth, in the direction of what feels aligned, in the direction of your desires, and pay attention. See what unfolds, see what opens up. And so honestly, it's been 7 years. And I can tell you without hesitation that 7 years has been one tiny step after another, listening, paying attention, and really honoring my own truth and rewriting my own script as I go.
Absolutely. Gosh, so much to unpack here. I was just taking notes. One thing that we started out was like, it's important to remember that it's powerful to ask for help. And I want to clear up that point, because it doesn't take away the responsibility from you have in your own life. Asking for help does not diminish that, but it gives you the space for more reflection. It gives you a capacity to look at things from a different angle, from somebody who maybe has experience with that matter and can kind of give you some navigation tools around that. So I just want to go to anybody who has challenges. I myself was like, oh, who would do that? But I had a coworker who said that she was experiencing, challenges at work, and that this resource that we had at Meta at that time, counseling, was helpful for her. So I was like, oh, just the fact that somebody talks about their experience can empower another person who may be needing that to explore that path too, because it normalizes that. But I've also learned, to your point about slowing down, that we need to create that space for reflection. No matter what you're doing, no matter even if you're happy in your career, we are accustomed to go, go, go. Like that's the way to get everything. But you might be going 100 miles an hour off the cliff and not wondering, is that the right path for me? And that's what maybe sometimes help does, is that it creates space, accountability. Then you might be like, I actually like that. I like having that space of reflection in my day-to-day life to think about what is best for me and why am I doing things. At least that's what I found. And it's shocking for me. Like now I'm, in my 30s, and I was never about like slowing down. That was like, whoa. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to take a moment and just meditate. Like that's crazy for me. But I realize like that's when I actually am feeling my best. That's when I'm thinking about what is serving me, not serving me. And the more you get into that step by step, the more it becomes like almost addictive, where like, oh, this is really where I empower myself. And I'm not going to be my best by going faster. I'm going to be my best if I honor slowing down And that's when life becomes a little more magical.
Oh my God. Amen, sister. I crave spaciousness now. And I never would have said that 7 or 8 years ago. And you're right. It happened bit by bit because the more I allowed myself, and I talk a lot about giving ourselves permission. Maybe we'll get into, I gave myself a crazy title when I left. That was another one of the things I did because I wanted to understand that I had a responsibility and an obligation. You just used those words, and I love it. Responsibility and an obligation to create my life in alignment with my truth and values and desires. And that is my responsibility to listen deeply and to understand. And then I can make choices. Listen, I quit so you don't have to, is what I often say to people. I'm not telling you to leave your job. What I'm telling you is we get to create success in a way that feels full and not empty. And as chief soul officers of our lives, we get to give, we have choices that we get to make every single day. And one of them speaks to exactly what you just said. We choose pause over push. And I love this idea because I feel, especially, I mean, you come out of the tech world, but we come out of these like go, 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 hustle. Like the corporate world is still very much wired that way. And there are a lot of expectations and there's a lot of modeling of that kind of hustle and grind in the cultures that are created. And so for me, I'm like, wait a second, like we hustle and grind, like if we don't choose pause, I believe fully, and maybe this is why I called my book Soulbatical, I called my journey Soulbatical, and I realized that Soulbatical doesn't mean leaving your job. It's actually a way of life. We get to choose, because I believe, and I will go to my grave shouting this from the mountaintops, that taking time, even if it's 15 minutes every morning, taking those pauses, those beats is what we need to be creative, to be innovative, to show up as badasses, to show up powerfully for ourselves and our teams and our families and our communities and the people around us. So I just think this whole idea of like, I don't have time to slow down is total BS. If you give yourself no other gift, write yourself a permission slip right now that says, I get to take a beat. I get to.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to dive now into your title, how you came up with it, and then your book. Like, what was your intention for all of that? You mentioned the title, you mentioned the book, but I'd love to create space. Like, what was the inspiration for that? What was the process of creating this, and what has it become now?
Yeah, so I'll bridge the gap because, so I did end up leaving Harley, obviously, spoiler alert, we already know that. I left Harley, but it was from the time I had the nightmare until the time I left, it was about a year. And so I was starting to do all of that reflection that we talked about. And I was taking those tiny steps forward, and I realized that I wanted to invest in the potential of my future self. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew that I wanted to allow myself to take a break outside of the corporate world. And as I got closer to announcing that, both to Harley and to everybody I knew, even when I said things like that to my inner circle and my family, they all were like, you're nuts. We're worried about you. Like, legitimately, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I feel in my bone marrow that this is the right decision, but I'm having a really hard time explaining it to people, because sometimes we just know if we're trusting our intuition and we're listening deeply to our soul, we know when we know. And yet communicating that to people and other people understanding it is a whole, it's why we often doubt ourselves, right? And so my little trick for dealing with this was I knew it was the right thing for me. I didn't know if it was going to last. I said, I'm going to take a year. I made sure I had a little fund. I made sure I had fed the fund. I had a little cushion of money. I'm not independently wealthy. I knew I couldn't leave for the rest of my life and fly around and do whatever I wanted. But I knew I had a cushion, and I always could make a decision 3 months in, 6 months in, maybe I would go back to the corporate world, but I owed it to myself and to my soul to do this exploration. And so I will never forget the moment when I told my family, and then I told Harley, and then I told the rest of the world. And then I was walking out and I was like, okay, I know I'm doing the right thing. And I remember the first morning I didn't go into Harley. I was like, oh, well, I need to tell the world what I'm doing. So of course I thought I should go on LinkedIn and like, okay, close out the chapter at Harley. And then what am I going to tell people? And I was faced with sheer terror looking at the Harley, so you close out Harley and then it's like, what do you want to put in? Where are you? What new chapter are you starting? And I'm like, what am I doing? How am I going to talk about this? And the next morning, it was like this divine download. I woke up and I was like, oh, I'm chief soul officer of my life, because I was really title sensitive at the time. And little did I know it would be the most important title I've ever held. But at the time, I was like, if I have a title that says I'm chief soul officer, I will have a responsibility and obligation to listen and to take steps in the direction of what feels aligned with whatever I learn. And I'm going on my Soulbatical, which was a mashup of these words, because I thought, well, it's not a sabbatical in the most traditional sense of the word. It's not a vacation. I'm not disappearing. And so I liked this idea of like a soul sabbatical. Like I was taking this time to go deep and I didn't know where it was going to lead. And so I'm very creative. I love language. So clearly this was my genius starting to come out but really also it was me as a marketer going, people need a handle for what I'm doing, which is bullshit. Nobody needed a handle, but I needed to be able to say something. So I was probably serving my ego at the time more than I was serving my soul. But the rest of the journey, really, it reminded me to sink deeply into reclaiming my identity, better understanding myself, building a relationship with my soul again, which had felt, as we said before, kind of malnourished and neglected. And that journey, which was pretty much like the hero's journey or the heroine's journey, right? It was me facing the truth that I had no identity that wasn't completely enmeshed with my corporate identity.
Right.
All of my worth and my value as a human, I had tied to sexy brands and big titles and big paychecks and global travel and, all of these things. I didn't know who Shelley Paxton was. And I finally asked myself the question, like, what if Shelley Paxton is the most iconic brand I could ever represent?
Ooh, yeah.
Right? Who is she? What does she want to say to the world? What is she like? Strip all the accolades and the titles and all that stuff away. Like, what juiciness is in there? And so that's the work that I started to do on Soulbatical. And I just kept following those breadcrumbs. And ultimately, I'd always wanted to write a book. And that ultimately led me to realize that Soulbatical was the book that I was meant to write. I had to take these really bold, brave, badass steps forward, go on this journey, and then, oh my God, that was the story I'm meant to tell the world. So I eventually wrote a book where I'm like putting my arm around you. They say you've got to write the book that you need to read.
Yes.
I wrote the book that I wish I would have had when I was at Harley. And I felt so incredibly alone going through these questions about wait, is this success? Why do I feel like crap? Why do I feel empty? What does successful really feel like? And where is that? And who's doing that? Who's being that? And so I ultimately wrote that book so I could put my arm around other people who are feeling that same way and help them figure it out for themselves. Because like I said, my path, your path, everybody's path, they're going to look very, very different. You get to figure it out. But I wanted to share how I started to navigate this and what were the questions I was asking, what were the tools I was using, what's the journey I went on as a way to inspire you. And Brene Brown has an amazing quote that I don't remember word for word, but she essentially says, we tell our stories because they're meant to become somebody else's survival guide. And that's 100% how I think about my book. It's someone else's survival guide. It's a memoir, a manifesto, and a guide.
Absolutely. I think so many things have hit me. One thing about that, I think it's important when things are challenging to have hope. And at times the hope can be hard to see within ourselves, but seeing other people who have gone through a similar journey and shared their wisdom gives us the hope that we can also do it.
Yeah.
And so I honor the journey that you took, because while we talk about it and you're smiling, it's incredibly difficult to go through every step of that. To say, to give
and
up
it
something.
Still is.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Yes, absolutely. But you've given people hope who are in similar situations to say, like, I can do something different and find my soul and feel different, especially if they're in a place where maybe they have it all, but their soul does not feel aligned to their external circumstances, right? So they have a different option. So now let's dive into the book, the beautiful book that's behind you. If you're on YouTube, check out the cover.
Thank you.
So what are maybe some gems, lessons, things you want to share with our listeners who maybe have not checked out the book yet?
Yeah, so I just gave you a sense for what the book is. It is a wild ride because it is part memoir. And so I do tell a lot of my story. It is very candid, very vulnerable, and I write like I speak. So if you want like a soul sister, I don't care what gender you are, but if you want a soul sister who's like, I'm putting my arm around you and let's have some real talk. It's real talk. Yeah. It's not bullshit. It's not academic. It's my journey, what I learned, shared very candidly. And at the end of each section, we pause and I share some of the same questions that I was asking myself. So if you really want to dig into this and you're serious about going on this journey, you get to pause and have reflection of your own. And I'm hoping that by asking yourself some of the same questions I was asking or doing some of the same exercises I was doing, there's one of my favorites in there is soul fuels versus soul sucks. So really digging into what lights you up, what is draining you, where are the shoulds, right? Yeah. Shedding the shackles of should is one of the things I talk about, right? Because so often we like the narratives of what keeps us going is dominated by the things we think we should be doing. And so we get to start to pull those apart, right? Yeah. So that's what it is. You go on this journey of, hearing my story, but then really starting to dig into your own. When we were talking about earlier about, asking for help, I think sometimes all we need is a mirror. So if I can be a mirror that helps to reflect maybe some of the things that you're experiencing, so you can ask yourself some of these questions, that's a really powerful start. And that's really what this book is meant to do. And honestly, what this is about at its core, and this is what I talk a lot about now, is the idea that success is a feeling. It's not a checklist. And when we approach success as a checklist, which is external and it's all the things outside of ourselves, that often leads to that feeling of empty. Like, well, I've done all the things. Why don't I feel lit up? Why don't I feel joy or fulfillment or whatever it is? when we think about success as a feeling, like, how do I want to feel? It
Yeah.
often is more aligned with our values, more aligned with how we want to show up in the world, more aligned with the impact we want to have in our lives, our businesses, and maybe the world at large. And so it's starting to shift to that idea that we get to define success in a way that celebrates our humanity, our well-being, and our soul, instead of success that's celebrating hustle and grind and burnout and mental health crises and all the things that we see happening in the world, and in particular in the States today.
Absolutely. One thing I think people might fear is that if they focus on feeling the success right now, that they lose their edge, right? And so what I mean by that is like they're like, well, yes, I like how this sounds, but how do I trust that if I give up this chase that I can sustain myself? Like, how can I trust that feeling good, like feeling successful, can actually keep me alive, means like sustainable financially in this real world where everybody else is grinding? What advice would you give people who are maybe in that mental state?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is interesting to me, and I can relate to this question. I can relate to this challenge. I've been there over and over again. And I think really this is being honest with ourselves, right? So, what are you pretending not to know in that scenario? Because I would say, how well is the current way you're approaching success serving you? Because I'll have clients and other people in my world say that. And then in the same breath, they tell me they're exhausted, they're burned out, they are not showing up as powerfully as they'd like to be showing up as a leader, as a human, because of that. So I ask you to take really honest inventory of how powerfully are you showing up under the current circumstances? How much of an edge do you really have when you feel entirely depleted? And how much is this serving you feeling more joyful, more fulfilled, more loved, more of whatever you want? Because often we're fighting so hard for the thing we don't really want at all.
Right.
So I say start with a dose of honesty. It is the hardest thing to sit down and say and admit, like, oh my God, maybe this isn't it. Or maybe it is, but I want to go about it in a way. So here's a great example. I've worked with people who say, I'm not coming to you because I want to leave the corporate world. My journey, I already know, is different than your journey, but I want to explore, like, what is going to make me feel more alive, more full, more aligned, more badass in the way that I'm showing up in the world. And very often it's that the role they're in, or maybe the company that they're in, is not deeply aligned with who they are as a human and what they want to feel, or the impact that they want to have. And so we start to really dig into, what is that? And who are you? And what really matters the most to you? And what are your non-negotiables? Maybe you don't want to live in that big city with that excruciating, mortgage or rent check every single month. Maybe, you understand where I'm going.
Right.
Digging into all of those things to say, what shifts can I start to make so that I feel more alive and energized and full at the end of every day? And only you know how that's going to look. But I would argue, based on my own experience and having seen this again and again, you're actually going to have more edge than you've ever had in your entire career, maybe your entire life, because the way you're showing up and the energy that everybody around you feels is going to be markedly different.
100%. And I love the beauty of all of that. So I think one thing is that, I was talking about souls, every soul is unique, right? So when we're talking about your path, it could be in corporate, it could be outside of it. It doesn't really matter. It's what matters is that you reflect on yourself and what are your current needs. And I'm on that journey right now, to be transparent. Like I still feel like it's still early on, hasn't been a year. And there are times where like, okay, why am I doing this? Right? Honestly, candidly. But then at the same time, I'm trusting that by taking the reflection space, by growing myself, amazing things will happen. And they're happening in small steps. Like I'm seeing a little bit of improvement here and here and here. And I would have never done this. Like this life would be completely impossible if I didn't go on this journey. Like I applied to do a TEDx talk recently, and just like nominated the podcast for an award and DUI for podcast. Like who would have known a
Yay!
couple months ago that I could even do something like that? And like now I'm communicating with people around the world. So it's funny how success, what I took it to be before, has changed, right? But how I feel is different. And I know I'm probably in that more of the state, like where I don't necessarily feel like it's all done. Like it doesn't feel safe, you know, cause like I'm not like, oh, now I have millions in the bank and now it feels like it's so easy. So I was like, but I want to share that vulnerability because a lot of times we don't share that. We share when things are kind of defined and comfortable. And like, oh, well, actually, I was having this hard time. But for anybody listening, I'm in that point where it is not always easy to trust that everything is going to turn out okay. But that said, I do feel more peace than I've ever had. I feel more peaceful about who I am and that I'm showing up better and that my life is a lot fuller than when I did with a secure job, making the money and everything on paper was good. So if anybody's in that vulnerable position, like I just want to empower you to follow this journey, even if it feels vulnerable, because in your gut, you sense that a little bit like that feels right. And I'm honoring that for my journey.
Oh, yes. And thank you for sharing that. I think it's so powerful to hear it from those of us who are in it. And listen, 7 years on, I'm still in it. I'm
Yeah.
in it further along, but I'm in it. Every day I'm making the choice to show up in my truth. And some days are easier than others. But let's be really honest. I want all of us to have a moment of excruciating honesty. Nothing is ever guaranteed. It doesn't matter if you're on your own or in a corporate role or doing whatever. Nothing is guaranteed.
Right.
And that's the thing. Like there's a woman who her name is Bronnie Ware. She is a palliative care nurse in Australia, and she sat with hundreds of people on their deathbeds, and she asked them all a series of questions to understand what were their top regrets. And then she published a book called The Top Regrets of the Dying.
Right.
And the number one regret that she heard from all of these people she talked to is, I regret not living a life true to myself, but instead living the life others expected of me. And listen, I think we do it because we have the narrative of what success looks like, or we have the fear that if I let go of this thing that feels so secure, I'm not going to be able to make it or feed my family or feed myself or whatever the case may be. And again, I'm not saying you have to just leap and the net will appear. That's to me, I don't know that I even believe in that. I am saying you can take tiny steps toward creating a life that feels more aligned, that feels more fulfilling, and that might progressively get more dramatic. It might get bigger. You may end up out on your own doing your own thing. You also may not. But there's a way to shift, even creating boundaries, energetic boundaries, taking pauses for yourself. That could be what we were talking about earlier. It can be as small as, I'm going to take breaks in my day every day to walk in nature, breathe deeply. Maybe it's meditate. Maybe it's play. How often do we play? And then say, maybe it's a long weekend every month. Maybe it's time off every quarter. But let's start to put these things in place so we can build this relationship and do more of what fuels us and get more aligned in what we're creating, because that's where the fullness comes from. And you get to decide what that is for you. We're all in it. Here's the other thing. It is a journey, not a destination. And I know people shout that quote all the time. success is the same way. There isn't a place to get to. There isn't like some big, like, oh my God, I finally made it. This is what we all learn, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Like the
Yes.
bright neon signs blinking, you are here. That's total bullshit.
Right.
It's not the case. It is a journey. And we get to check in along the way and ask ourselves, like, how does this feel? Does it feel aligned? Maybe I need to course correct a little bit, but it truly is a forever journey. And the more we start to think about it that way, I think the more empowered we become to create a life that really lights us up.
Right. And the more fun the journey it is, if we actually listen to ourselves,
Yes.
the journey, we become active. We have agency on the journey. We're not just like on a train that we don't know where it's going. We just sat in there and we're like stuck. No, like we get to get off and choose like, where do we want to go every step of the way if we're more attuned to ourselves. And I also am curious, here you are, a huge leader in these amazing companies, and then you're going on the soul journey. And you've done things like doing the talk like where soul meets success. Can you share like how have leaders responded? Like, have there been leaders who responded to you searching and kind of going on this quest for the Soulbatical? How have they responded to you going out and doing this?
Yeah, it's been really fun because Soulbatical is people love the word, the term, but it's also really polarizing because if you don't understand the context that it's truly a way of being, I think I scare a lot of people who are like, oh my God, she's the person who tells everybody to leave their job. And it's like, no, time out. That's the exact opposite of what I'm doing. Yeah. But I also understand that at first glance, that is literally like judging a book by its cover, right? Like that is literally what the word sounds like. And so as I have ramped up my keynote speaking, I was like, what am I really talking about? And that's when it hit me. The goal for me was that I'm helping people find this intersection in their own life where soul meets success. And we get to stand at that intersection and we get to make bold, brave, and badass decisions for ourselves from that intersection. And I think soul and success for a long time, I mean, let's be honest, soul isn't even really a word we were talking about, in the leadership space, in the corporate space. So that alone felt really scary for me to start to bring it in. But I thought that's my truth. That's what I was put here to do. And then I started to think, wow, well, what if more people had permission to say soul and success they aren't diametrically opposed. They are powerful when combined and when one informs the other. And that's when you feel more energized and more fulfilled and all the things that you and I have been talking about. And so I literally have had people cry. I've had people hug me for minutes at a time and say thank you. I have had people, completely rethink the way they're showing up for themselves, for their teams, the influence they want to have on the culture in their organization. So I feel like my takeaway so far, and I've only been out in the world with this keynote like really boldly for the last 6 to 8 months. So it still feels, thank you. It still feels very new, but I feel like I'm writing every leader in the world a permission slip. And I talk about permission slips in my work. I'm like, as chief soul officers, yes, we get to choose pause over push. We also get to choose permission over pleasing. And we get to write ourselves permission slips. And I feel like by doing this and sharing my story and saying all of this, I'm also handing every leader a permission slip to do this on their own terms and to decide what they need in their lives to show up most powerfully. So, even if it's as simple as boundaries, like decide what's okay and what's not okay. When are you not available, as an example, for communication with your team and with your boss because you want to be with your family or with your community or with yourself? That might be one really tiny step forward, is to write a permission slip around some of those boundaries that are missing or maybe have eroded over time. So I get a lot of energy from knowing that I'm handing that permission slip and I'm inspiring people to really think about success differently. And then we get to collectively have these ripples of impact, because we not only change our own lives when we start thinking about success this way, when we model this way and we show up this way, we have ripples of impact that go far beyond ourselves. And that's when I get really excited about what's happening.
Oh, Shelley, I could just listen to you all day. And what I think about that, just to wrap that up, is that we often think like, who am I to go for a life where I can, live out my true purpose, enrich my soul. And I've learned to question that inner voice, whatever self-doubt is, be like, who am I not to do that? Because really, it's not like the world is full of it's not like we have an excessive amount of happiness in the world. It's not. We have the opposite problem. And so you showing up fully, giving yourself permission to be your bold self, empowers yourself to make the world better, and it gives other people the permission to do so. So do so boldly and confidently. Don't doubt it. You are absolutely worthy just because of nature of being human. And you're trying to make the world a little better. That's all it takes.
Woot, woot. Yes. Preach, sister.
Thanks.
100% yes.
Okay, Shelley,
I love it.
I do unfortunately have to wrap this up, although I wish we could go for a couple more hours. But here at Right Off Track, we wrap up with 3 rapid fire questions. So let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready, girl.
I know. Okay, let's go for it. What's one piece of advice for someone feeling success empty right now?
Oh, I would say get clear on your values. I find that we are not schooled in this. Get clear on your values. The best place to go, and Anya, I'll send you a link if you want to put it in your show notes. Brene Brown has a PDF of a list of 100 values. When you get to understand very clearly what your top 3 values are, everything starts to shift. So start there.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, I'll definitely link that in the resources. Check out the links description. Okay, what is one goal or one aspiration for 2024 that you're excited about?
I want to stand on more stages, because my success currency, and I talk a lot about, we get to decide what is our success currency. Mine is not, it's not money, although money comes when I'm standing in my power. For me, it's impact. And standing on stages is a great way to share my energy and have an, increasingly bigger impact. And so standing on, 10 to 15 really juicy aligned stages, lighting thousands of souls on fire. Yes, that.
That sounds amazing. So if you're listening to Shelley, you're like, oh my gosh, I would love to hear her. Reach out, especially if you're a corporate company, reach out to people who are doing trainings, presentations, speaking opportunities. Recommend Shelley, and I'm sure she'd be delighted to come and join and share her Soulbatical inspiration with you too. Okay, but not least, of course. Last but not least, in the positive sense, going off track is.
It's in a positive sense, it's a soul adventure. It's a soul adventure. It's a choose your own adventure that only you can do. And I think going off track opens our hearts and minds and souls to what's possible.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Shelley. I so appreciate you joining us. And to all of us, thank you so much for investing in yourself. And from Shelley, you are all getting a hall pass to be a soul badass and find out what that means for you today. So thank you again. And as always, let's take over the world together, right off track. And Shelley, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.